My name is Amanda. I am 32 years old, and I never expected to evict my entire family on Christmas Day. The home that has been in our family for 3 generations became the battlefield for the ugliest dinner in Wilson family history. When my brother Brian smirked and told me I had a week to pack my things, he had no idea I was holding the property deed with my name on it. If you think family holidays are tense, wait until you hear this. Before I dive into this wild story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments. Hit that like button. And subscribe if you want more stories about standing your ground when it matters most. Growing up in the Wilson family home on Maple Street was like living inside a storybook. Built in 1948 by my grandfather Harold, the Victorian-style house, with its wraparound porch and secret reading nooks, was more than just a building. It was the keeper of our family history. Every creak in the hardwood floors told stories of the generations who had walked these halls before me. My earliest memories are filled with the scent of my mother Catherine baking apple pies in our spacious kitchen, the sound of my father George working on home improvement projects in the basement, and unfortunately, the constant complaints of my older brother Brian, who seemed determined to escape our boring small-town life from the moment he could talk. "This place is suffocating," Brian would say even as a teenager, while I treasured every corner of our home. I loved helping Dad maintain the garden where Mom grew her prize-winning roses. I spent hours exploring the attic where trunks full of family heirlooms waited to reveal their secrets. The hand-carved banister that I slid down despite Mom's warnings held the worn smoothness of 3 generations of children doing exactly the same thing. The 4 of us weren't perfect, but we were family. Sunday dinners were mandatory. Holiday celebrations were elaborate affairs with extended family filling every room. And summer evenings meant sitting on the porch swing, watching fireflies emerge as the neighborhood children played until dusk fell. I was always the one who appreciated our history and traditions. While my friends complained about their parents' rules, I recognized the stability that our home provided. Our house was the one where all my friends wanted to hang out. Not because we had the nicest things, but because it felt safe and warm in a way that their more modern homes often didn't. My mother Catherine worked as a nurse at the local hospital, coming home with stories of both heartbreak and miracles. She taught me compassion and the value of service to others. My father George was a high school history teacher who instilled in me a love of learning and respect for the past. They weren't wealthy by any means, but they provided us with everything we truly needed. Brian, for years older than me, was always restless and ambitious. He was handsome, charismatic, and knew exactly how to charm our parents and everyone else in town. While I was content with our simple life, he constantly spoke of bigger cities, bigger opportunities, and bigger bank accounts. He was smart and graduated at the top of his class, earning a scholarship to a prestigious university on the East Coast. "Just watch," he told me the day he left for college. "I'll come back in a few years and buy Mom and Dad a mansion 10 times the size of this old place." I was 14 when he left, and I missed him despite his dismissive attitude toward our hometown. With Brian gone, the house felt quieter, and I became even closer to our parents. I helped Mom with her community projects and assisted Dad with organizing his vast collection of historical books and documents. They never pressured me to be like Brian, allowing me to find my own path. After high school, I attended the local community college and then transferred to the state university just 40 minutes away. I studied accounting, a practical choice that would allow me to find work nearby. Some might call it lacking ambition, but I had different priorities. I wanted to remain close to home, close to my parents, close to the community that had shaped me. Meanwhile, Brian was building an impressive career in finance in New York. His visits home became increasingly rare. Only Christmas and occasionally Thanksgiving if his busy schedule allowed. Each time he returned, he seemed more disconnected from us, more impatient with our small-town rhythms. He brought expensive gifts that often felt impersonal, as if he was trying to buy his way out of spending actual time with us. During one of his brief visits when I was 23, I overheard him talking to Dad about the house. "You should really consider selling this place," he said. "It's too big for you and Mom now. You could get a nice condo with no maintenance and pocket the difference for retirement." Dad just chuckled. "This house is more than just real estate, son. It's our family legacy." I didn't think much of this conversation at the time. It seemed like just another example of Brian's disconnection from what truly mattered to our family. But it was the first sign of what would eventually become a serious point of contention. As the years passed, our parents began to show their age. Mom developed arthritis that made her nursing work increasingly difficult. Dad started forgetting small things, nothing serious at first, but concerning nonetheless. I had established myself as an accountant at a local firm by then, and I made it a point to have dinner with them at least 3 times a week and help with household maintenance on weekends. Brian called regularly from New York, but his physical presence in their lives was minimal. When he did visit, he would often criticize how I was enabling them by helping so much. "They need to downsize," he insisted during one heated discussion. "And you need to get your own life instead of living in their shadow." What he didn't understand was that caring for our parents and preserving our family home wasn't a burden to me. It was a choice I made gladly. This wasn't about being unable to move on. It was about honoring what mattered most to me. And as our parents' health began to decline more seriously, my decision to stay close proved increasingly important. By the time I turned 28, the family dynamics had shifted dramatically. Dad was diagnosed with early-onset dementia, and Mom's arthritis had progressed to the point where managing the stairs in our 2-story home became a daily challenge. Brian, now a senior investment banker with an impressive address in Manhattan, a beautiful wife named Jennifer, and 2 perfectly dressed children, Thomas and Elizabeth, had opinions about everything we should be doing differently. "You need to get them into assisted living," he would insist during our weekly phone calls. "That house is becoming a hazard. And honestly, Amanda, you need to start thinking about your own future. You can't be their caretaker forever." What Brian didn't see was how much Dad's face lit up when he walked through the garden he had tended for decades. He didn't understand how Mom found comfort in being surrounded by the furniture she had carefully selected with Grandma 40 years ago. The house wasn't just a building to them. It was the physical embodiment of their life's work and memories. As for me, I had built a life that balanced my career with family responsibilities. I had good friends, dated occasionally, and had even been promoted to senior accountant at my firm. But to Brian, anything less than the fast-paced, high-earning lifestyle he had chosen was somehow a failure. The real trouble began when Dad's medical bills started piling up. Their insurance covered most expenses, but the specialized treatments and home modifications needed for their comfort required additional funds. I did what I could from my salary, but it wasn't enough. During one of his rare visits home, Brian surveyed the situation with cold calculation. "This house has to be worth at least $400,000 in today's market," he said, walking through the living room like he was already giving a tour to potential buyers. "If you sold it, that would more than cover their medical expenses and provide for quality care facilities." "This house is their life," I argued. "Moving them would destroy Dad. He's already confused enough about time and place. Taking him away from the home he's known for decades would be cruel." Brian scoffed. "That's emotional thinking, not practical. Sometimes the kind decision isn't the easy one." What he didn't know was that I had already been exploring options. I had consulted with elder care attorneys and financial advisors specializing in senior care. I had researched every program available to help seniors stay in their homes. And most importantly, I had been having difficult but necessary conversations with our parents about the future. One evening, after Brian had returned to New York following a particularly tense weekend visit, Mom asked me to sit with her in the kitchen. Her hands, now gnarled from arthritis, wrapped around her favorite teacup as she looked at me with clear, determined eyes. "Your father and I have been talking," she said quietly. "We know Brian thinks we should sell the house, and from a purely financial perspective, he might be right." My heart sank, thinking they had finally been convinced by Brian's relentless arguments. "But this home," she continued, looking around the kitchen where she had prepared thousands of family meals, "isn't just a financial asset to us. It's where we raised our children. It's where we built our life. And we want it to remain in the family." That night, they revealed their plan. They had met with their attorney months earlier and had decided to put the house in my name while retaining a life estate for themselves. This meant they could live there for the remainder of their lives, but the house would legally belong to me, protecting it from being sold to cover potential medical expenses if they needed nursing home care in the future. "We know you'll honor our wishes," Dad said during one of his increasingly rare moments of complete clarity. "You understand what this place means to us." I was overwhelmed by their trust in me. "What about Brian?" I asked. "He's going to be furious." Mom's expression hardened slightly. "Brian has chosen his path. He has built a wonderful life for himself far from here, and we're proud of him. But he left. Amanda, you stayed. You've been here through everything. And we know your connection to this home is as deep as ours." The legal transfer was completed quietly. I offered to tell Brian, but my parents insisted it wasn't necessary right away. "There will be time for that conversation," Mom said. "Let's not disrupt the holidays." Little did we know how prophetic those words would be. The legal papers were signed in October. By November, Dad's condition had worsened significantly. He was having good days and bad days, with the bad increasingly outnumbering the good. Mom was trying to stay strong, but I could see the toll it was taking on her. When Brian called to discuss Christmas plans, I was surprised by his insistence on hosting the holiday at the family home. "Jennifer and I think it would be good for the kids to have a traditional Christmas in Grandma and Grandpa's house," he said. "We'll handle everything. You won't need to do a thing." Something in his tone made me uneasy, but I pushed the feeling aside. Perhaps this was Brian's way of reconnecting with his roots, of acknowledging the importance of family traditions. Maybe he was finally seeing what I had always seen in our family home. I couldn't have been more wrong. The week before Christmas, our quiet home transformed into a hub of activity. Brian arrived with Jennifer and the children 3 days earlier than expected, bringing with them an excessive amount of luggage for what was supposed to be a 5-day stay. "We thought we'd come early to help get everything ready," Brian explained, though his idea of help seemed to consist mainly of criticizing how I had been maintaining the house. "The gutters need cleaning," he noted on his first morning, looking up at the roof with disapproval. "And this porch railing is loose. Haven't you been taking care of these things?" I bit my tongue, resisting the urge to point out that I had been juggling a full-time job while taking Dad to multiple doctor appointments each week and helping Mom with daily tasks that her arthritic hands made difficult. Instead, I smiled and thanked him for his observations. Jennifer, always impeccably dressed even for breakfast, spent most of her time reorganizing our kitchen and living room, moving furniture and decorations that had been in the same places for decades. "We just want to make things more functional," she explained when Mom looked distressed at seeing her cherished arrangements disturbed. "And it will look so much better for the photos." The children, 8-year-old Thomas and 6-year-old Elizabeth, were sweet but had clearly been raised in an environment very different from the one Brian and I had experienced. They were hesitant to play outside for fear of getting dirty and seemed confused by the concept of entertaining themselves without electronic devices. I tried to embrace their presence, grateful that Mom and Dad had the chance to spend time with their only grandchildren. Dad was having a good week, recognizing everyone most of the time and even sharing some stories from Brian's childhood that made my brother uncomfortably shift in his seat. "Remember when you fell through the ice on Henderson Pond?" Dad asked with a rare chuckle. Amanda here couldn't have been more than 5. but she was the one who had the sense to run for help while everyone else was panicking. Brian quickly changed the subject, steering the conversation toward his recent promotion and the private school where Thomas had just been accepted. On the evening of December 23rd, I overheard Brian on the phone in the backyard, his voice low but intense. "Everything's proceeding as planned," he said to someone on the other end. "They don't suspect anything. I've already spoken with a realtor friend who thinks we could list it by February, pending some updates and staging." My blood ran cold as I stood frozen by the kitchen window. He was still planning to sell the house, despite knowing how much it meant to our parents. He was just waiting for the right moment to make his move. That night, I could barely sleep. I considered confronting him immediately but decided it would be better to be prepared for whatever he was planning. The next morning, I quietly went to my apartment and retrieved the property deed and related documents from my safe. I made copies and placed the originals in a folder that I slipped into my purse. Christmas Eve was a strange mixture of traditional family warmth and underlying tension. We decorated the tree together, though Jennifer insisted on a color-coordinated theme rather than using the mismatched family ornaments we had collected over decades. Mom tried to teach Elizabeth how to make her famous cinnamon rolls, though my niece seemed more interested in taking selfies with the dough than actually learning the recipe. Brian spent most of the day making phone calls from Dad's study, emerging periodically to take measurements of rooms and snap photos when he thought no one was looking. I caught him examining the antique grandfather clock in the hallway, mentally appraising it rather than appreciating the fact that it had announced the hours of our family life for 3 generations. That evening, as we sat around the fireplace drinking hot chocolate, Brian cleared his throat and put on what I recognized as his business presentation voice. "I think tomorrow after dinner would be a good time for us to have a family discussion about some important matters," he announced. "I have some proposals that I believe will benefit everyone." Mom looked at me with worry in her eyes. I reached over and squeezed her hand reassuringly. "That sounds fine, Brian," I said calmly. "I actually have some information to share as well." He looked momentarily surprised, but quickly recovered with a confident smile. "Great. Christmas dinner and then family business." It's settled. As everyone headed to bed, I helped Mom up the stairs. "Don't worry," I whispered. "Everything's going to be okay." She patted my cheek. "I know, sweetheart. Your father and I trust you completely." I spent another restless night, mentally preparing for the confrontation to come. Christmas morning arrived with forced cheer. The children opened their many presents with excitement that temporarily lightened the atmosphere. Dad was having one of his better days and delighted in watching his grandchildren's joy. I threw myself into preparing the Christmas dinner alongside Mom, following the recipes and traditions that had defined our holidays for as long as I could remember. Jennifer offered to modernize the menu, but I gently insisted that we stick with the classics this year. "These dishes connect us to our past," I explained. "Each recipe has a story." By late afternoon, the dining room table was set with Mom's best china and Grandma's silver. The turkey was golden brown, the sides were plentiful, and the pie cooled on the windowsill. It would have been a perfect family Christmas dinner, if not for the storm I knew was brewing. The dining room glowed with candlelight as we gathered around the table that had hosted Wilson family Christmases since before I was born. Dad sat at the head of the table, looking distinguished despite his illness, with Mom to his right. Brian positioned himself at the opposite end, a symbolic claiming of patriarchal authority that wasn't lost on me. Jennifer sat beside him, with the children on either side of the table. I took my place next to Mom, my purse hanging on the back of my chair with the property documents inside. The first part of dinner progressed with surface pleasantries. We complimented the food, shared appropriate holiday sentiments, and listened to the children describe their favorite gifts. Dad was unusually lucid, recalling Christmases from decades past with surprising clarity. "Remember the year we got 2 feet of snow and had to cancel the extended family gathering?" he asked. Smiling at Mom, We ended up building that enormous snowman in the front yard. The Coleman family snowman, Mom added, her eyes twinkling. We gave him Dad's hat and my scarf. And I contributed my math test with a D+ as his heart, Brian added with a rare moment of self-deprecating humor. Dad said it was appropriate since the snowman was cold-hearted and so was my math teacher. We all laughed, and for a brief moment, it felt like the family we used to be. The moment was shattered when Brian tapped his water glass with his spoon after the main course had been cleared and before dessert was served. I think now is a good time for our family discussion, he announced, his voice shifting to the authoritative tone he likely used in corporate boardrooms. Mom, Dad, Amanda, Jennifer and I have been talking about your situation extensively. Jennifer nodded on cue, her perfectly manicured hands folded primly on the table. The reality is, Brian continued, this house has become too much for you to manage. The stairs are dangerous for Mom, and the maintenance is clearly overwhelming. He glanced pointedly at me. Despite Amanda's efforts, which we appreciate, it's time to be practical. I watched Mom's expression fall as Dad looked confused, the moment of clarity already slipping away. We found an excellent assisted living community just 20 minutes from here. Brian continued, pulling a glossy brochure from his jacket pocket. They have an opening for a 2-bedroom unit starting February 1st. It's perfect timing. What about our home? Mom asked quietly. Brian smiled in what he probably thought was a reassuring way. That's the best part. The house can be sold to fund your care for years to come. My realtor colleague thinks we could get $450,000 in this market with some strategic updates. Jennifer has connections with a stager who could transform it to appeal to young families. Dad's confusion was deepening. Sell our home? But what about Amanda? Brian's expression hardened slightly. That brings me to the next point. Amanda, it's time for you to move on too. You're 32 years old and still living in your hometown, tied to this house and our parents. It's not healthy. I opened my mouth to correct him, to point out that I had my own apartment downtown and only stayed over occasionally when Dad was having a bad night, but he pressed on. You need a fresh start. Jennifer's brother works at a great accounting firm in Chicago. He can help you get an interview. We think you should use the week after New Year's to start packing up. That gives you about a week. His tone shifted from false concern to smug authority. You have 1 week to leave, he said, looking directly at me. Then the renovations begin. Mom gasped. Dad looked between us with growing distress. The children squirmed uncomfortably, sensing the tension. Mom and Dad haven't agreed to any of this, I pointed out, keeping my voice steady. Brian waved his hand dismissively. They're not in a position to manage these decisions anymore. As the eldest, I'm taking responsibility for ensuring their care and financial security. I looked at our parents. Mom? Dad? Is this what you want? Before they could answer, Brian interrupted. They might not think it's what they want, but it's what they need. Sometimes children have to make difficult decisions for their parents' own good. I took a deep breath and reached for my purse. Actually, Brian, I don't think you have the authority to make those decisions. He laughed condescendingly. Of course I do. I'm the one with the financial expertise. I'm the one who understands real estate as an investment. I'm the one thinking clearly rather than emotionally. I pulled out the folder and placed it on the table. What I mean is, you legally don't have the authority to sell this house. You can't sell what you don't own. Brian's confident smile faltered. What are you talking about? With steady hands, I opened the folder and removed the property deed. This house legally belongs to me. Mom and Dad transferred ownership to me 2 months ago, while retaining life estate rights for themselves. The silence that fell over the table was absolute. Jennifer's mouth opened in shock. The children looked confused. Mom reached over and took Dad's trembling hand. Brian's face flushed red. That's impossible. They would never do that without consulting me. It's true, Mom said quietly. It was our decision. We wanted the house to remain in the family, with someone who truly loves it. This is ridiculous, Brian sputtered, reaching for the document. Let me see that. I slid it across the table, confident in its legitimacy. He scanned it, his expression darkening. This was done behind my back, he accused. You manipulated them when they were vulnerable. No, son, Dad said, with surprising strength in his voice. We asked Amanda to accept this responsibility because she has always understood what this home means to us. Brian stood abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the hardwood floor. I'll challenge this. You were not of sound mind when you signed this. I remained calm. The attorney who prepared the documents specifically conducted cognitive assessments before proceeding. It's all documented and legally binding. So what now? Brian demanded. You're going to keep them prisoners in this deteriorating house while their health fails? No, I replied. I'm going to honor their wishes to remain in their home with proper support. I've already arranged for modifications to make the house safer and more accessible. The spare bedroom is being converted to a first-floor master suite, so they won't need to navigate the stairs. I pulled out another document. And I've secured a home healthcare service that can provide daily assistance. Their insurance covers most of it, and I'll handle the rest. Brian looked stunned. You've planned all this without saying a word to me. Just as you planned to sell their home and ship them off to assisted living without consulting them, I countered. Jennifer placed a restraining hand on Brian's arm as he opened his mouth to argue further. There's something else you should know, I continued. Since I now own the property, and since you've made your intentions clear, I'm afraid I need to ask you to leave. Not in a week. Tomorrow. You can't be serious, Brian gasped. Actually, you all have 24 hours to pack your things and find other accommodations. I believe there's a lovely hotel downtown with availability. Their forks literally dropped onto their plates with a clatter. Mom looked torn between distress at the family conflict and relief that their home was being protected. Dad, despite his condition, seemed to understand exactly what was happening and nodded slightly in my direction. You would throw your own family out on Christmas? Jennifer asked incredulously. No, I corrected her. I would never force my parents from their home. They are welcome here for the rest of their lives, as they wished. But those who want to profit from selling their legacy against their wishes? Yes. I'm asking you to leave. Brian stood up, his face contorted with anger. This isn't over. We're family. You can't just cut us out. I agree that we're family, I said, rising to meet his gaze. Which is why I expected you to respect our parents' wishes rather than treating their home and belongings as assets to be liquidated. Family means more than financial transactions, Brian. It's about honor, respect, and care. When you're ready to demonstrate those qualities, you'll be welcome to visit, but not to take over. As the implications of what I had revealed sank in, the carefully orchestrated Christmas dinner fell completely apart. The children began to cry, confused by the adult conflict. Jennifer hurriedly took them upstairs. Brian stormed out to the porch, phone already in hand, presumably calling his lawyer. I turned to my parents, concern washing over me. I'm sorry it had to happen this way. Especially today. Mom reached for my hand. You did what we asked you to do, what we trusted you to do. Protect our home. Dad, in a moment of perfect clarity, added, and in doing so, you protected our dignity. That's the best Christmas gift we could have received. The hours following the Christmas dinner confrontation were chaotic. Brian alternated between rage, disbelief, and attempts at negotiation as he paced through the house making phone calls. Jennifer silently packed their belongings, her disapproving glances communicating more than words could. The children, confused and upset, kept asking why we couldn't all just get along. Mom retreated to her favorite armchair in the living room, emotionally exhausted but resolute. Dad, affected by the stress, became increasingly confused as the evening progressed, repeatedly asking why everyone seemed upset on Christmas. I sat with him, gently redirecting his attention to happier topics when possible. Around 9 in the evening, Brian cornered me in the kitchen where I was cleaning up the remains of our disrupted holiday meal. "This isn't like you, Amanda," he said, his tone accusatory but slightly calmer than before. "You've always been the peacemaker, the reasonable one. What changed?" I set down the dish I was washing and turned to face him. "I grew up, Brian. I learned that sometimes keeping the peace means allowing others to cause harm. Sometimes being reasonable means being taken advantage of." "Is that what you think I'm doing? Taking advantage?" He looked genuinely offended. "I'm trying to ensure our parents have proper care. By selling the home they love without their consent? By making decisions about their lives without consulting them? By dismissing their clearly stated wishes because you think you know better?" I shook my head. "That's not care, Brian. That's control." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture that reminded me of the brother I'd grown up with, not the corporate stranger he'd become. "You don't understand the financial realities. This house is their biggest asset. Maintaining it while paying for increasing healthcare needs will eventually drain everything they have." "I do understand the financial realities," I countered. "I'm an accountant, remember? I've been managing their finances for years. I've set up their medical insurance supplements, their prescription plans, their property tax relief programs. I know exactly what they can and cannot afford." For a moment, he looked surprised, as if he'd forgotten I had professional expertise of my own. "There's something you're not telling me," I continued, studying his expression. "This isn't just about Mom and Dad's care. What's the rush to sell this place? Why push so hard right now?" Brian's eyes flickered away from mine, and I knew I'd hit a nerve. "It's just good financial planning," he insisted. "No, it's more than that." A suspicion formed in my mind. "Are you in some kind of trouble, Brian?" His silence told me everything. "You are, aren't you? That's why you need the house sold quickly. You need money." "It's not what you think," he finally said, his voice lower. "I made some investments that didn't pan out. The market turned unexpectedly. It's temporary, but I need to cover some positions before my year-end review." I felt a cold wave of understanding wash over me. "You were counting on your share of the house sale to bail you out. That's why you scheduled this whole intervention for Christmas. You're facing a deadline." He didn't deny it. "How bad is it?" I asked. "Bad enough," he admitted, "but not insurmountable with the right resources." "And those resources would come from selling our parents' home," I concluded. "Their security and comfort traded for your financial recovery." "It wouldn't be like that," he insisted. "They'd be well taken care of in the assisted living facility. The sale would provide for them and help me through a rough patch. Everyone would win." I shook my head in disbelief. "Except they don't want to leave their home." "That's not winning for them, Brian." The next morning, Christmas Day officially over, the tension remained thick as Brian and Jennifer prepared to leave with the children. Despite my 24-hour ultimatum, I hadn't actually expected them to find alternative accommodations so quickly. But Brian's pride wouldn't allow him to ask for more time. As they loaded their luggage into their rental SUV, Mom insisted on coming outside to say goodbye to the grandchildren. The temperature had dropped overnight, and a light snow dusted the walkway. I helped her into her coat and stood supportively beside her as she hugged Thomas and Elizabeth. "Will we see you again, Grandma?" Elizabeth asked, her innocent question cutting through the adult pretenses. "Of course you will, sweetheart," Mom assured her. "This is still your grandparents' home, and you are always welcome to visit." Brian stiffened at her words, clearly noting the emphasis on whose home it was. As Jennifer ushered the children into the car, Brian approached Mom. His expression was a complex mixture of frustration, regret, and calculation. "I still think you're making a mistake," he said quietly. "Both of you." He glanced at me. "This house will become a burden, not a blessing." Mom straightened her shoulders, suddenly looking stronger than she had in months. "This house has never been a burden to us, Brian. It's been our sanctuary." "I'm sorry you couldn't see that." After they drove away, Mom turned to me with tears in her eyes. I never wanted it to come to this. A family divided at Christmas. I put my arm around her shoulders. The division wasn't your doing, Mom. Or mine. I know, she sighed. But it still breaks my heart. Back inside. I helped Dad understand what had happened in the simplest terms possible. Brian and his family had to go home early, I explained. But they sent their love. He nodded, though I wasn't sure how much he comprehended. His good days were becoming less frequent, making the clear moments all the more precious. That afternoon, while Mom was resting, I found Dad in his study, looking through an old photo album. I sat beside him, touched by the images of our family in happier times. Your brother, he said, pointing to a picture of Brian at about 10 years old, proudly holding up a fish he'd caught, always wanted more than what was in front of him. It was a startlingly lucid observation. I nodded, encouraging him to continue. Even as a boy, he was looking over the horizon. Not necessarily a bad quality. Dad turned the page. But he never learned to appreciate what was already in his hands. Why do you think that is? I asked gently. Dad considered this, his weathered finger tracing the outline of our family standing in front of the house many Christmases ago. Some people are born searching. Some are born finding. He's a searcher. You're a finder. There was wisdom in his simple analysis. Brian had always been restless, ambitious, looking for the next opportunity, the bigger success. I had always been more focused on nurturing what was already present, finding value in what others might overlook. I didn't choose between you, Dad said suddenly, his eyes clearer than they had been in weeks. When we put the house in your name, it wasn't choosing you over him. I know, Dad. It was choosing the right guardian for something precious to us. He closed the photo album. Like choosing the right person to care for a family heirloom. We chose the one who would treasure it, not sell it. His moment of clarity was a gift greater than any wrapped present could have been. I hugged him, trying to memorize the feeling of his arms around me, knowing these moments would become increasingly rare. Later that evening, after Dad had gone to bed, I found Mom in the kitchen making tea. She looked exhausted, but somehow unburdened. Brian called, she said, handing me a cup. After they checked into the hotel, my stomach tightened. What did he say? He apologized, she replied, surprising me. Not for wanting us to move or for planning to sell the house, but for not telling us about his financial troubles. Did he explain what happened? Mom nodded. Apparently. He made some high-risk investments, trying to secure a promotion. When they didn't pay off, he borrowed money he shouldn't have to cover the losses. Now he's in danger of losing his job if he can't replace those funds. The pieces were falling into place. So he saw the house as his safety net. Yes, Mom sighed. He asked if we would consider a loan against the property instead of selling it outright. What did you tell him? I told him that the house is no longer ours to borrow against. It's yours now. She looked at me with tired eyes. I also told him that if he had simply been honest about his situation from the beginning, we might have found another way to help him. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. Brian's deception and manipulation had cost him the very support he was seeking. By trying to control the situation, he had lost any say in the outcome. The week between Christmas and New Year's passed in relative calm. Brian and his family returned to New York earlier than planned. The festive family holiday effectively ruined by the property revelation. I took time off work to stay with Mom and Dad, helping them recover from the emotional turmoil and ensuring they felt secure in their home. Then, 3 days into January, I received a certified letter from a law firm representing Brian. The letter formally contested the property transfer, claiming that our parents had been unduly influenced and lacked the capacity to make such a significant financial decision. Though I had anticipated this move, seeing the legal challenge in black and white still felt like a punch to the stomach. I didn't share the letter with Mom and Dad immediately, not wanting to cause them additional stress. Instead, I contacted the attorney who had handled the original property transfer. Marilyn Johnson had been our family's lawyer for decades. She had known our parents since before Brian and I were born and had handled everything from their wills to the property deed transfer. I was wondering when this would happen. She said when I called, "Your brother seemed like the type to contest. Do we have anything to worry about?" I asked. "Not legally," she assured me. I was extremely thorough precisely because I anticipated a potential challenge. "We have documented cognitive assessments from your father's doctor confirming that despite his diagnosis, he had decisional capacity on the day the documents were signed. Your mother has no cognitive impairments at all. Both of them clearly articulated their reasons for the transfer, and I have detailed notes from our discussions." Her confidence was reassuring, but I still felt uneasy. Brian can afford expensive lawyers. He might drag this out for years. He could try. Marilyn acknowledged. "But the facts are on your side, and there's something else he may not have considered." "What's that?" "The public nature of legal proceedings. If this goes to court, all of the details become public record, including his attempt to force his elderly parents from their home against their wishes. For someone in his position, the reputational damage might be considerable." It was a factor I hadn't considered, but I knew it would matter to Brian. His professional image was carefully cultivated. A public legal battle that painted him as trying to displace his elderly parents for financial gain would not align with that image. I decided to wait before responding to the legal threat. Sometimes, the best response is patience. A week later, Brian called. Not his lawyers. Him personally. "I want to talk," he said, his tone more subdued than I had heard it in years. "In person. No lawyers. No Jennifer. Just us." We arranged to meet at a neutral location, a coffee shop downtown that neither of us frequented regularly. When I arrived, Brian was already there, sitting at a corner table with 2 cups of coffee. He looked tired, the confident facade cracked to reveal the strain beneath. "Thank you for coming," he said as I sat down. It was perhaps the most genuine thing he'd said to me in years. "What did you want to discuss?" I asked, not touching the coffee he'd ordered for me. He took a deep breath. "I'm withdrawing the legal challenge to the property transfer." I tried not to show my surprise. "Why?" "Multiple reasons," he admitted. "First, my lawyer informed me that the case would be difficult to win given the precautions taken during the transfer. Second, Jennifer pointed out that a public legal battle would damage more than just my professional reputation." He paused, seeming to struggle with what to say next. "And third, I had a long conversation with Mom that made me reconsider some things." This caught my attention. "What kind of conversation?" Brian looked down at his coffee cup. "She told me about the years I've been away. Not just the big events, but the daily realities. How you come over 3 times a week to help with groceries and cleaning. How you take Dad to every doctor's appointment and keep meticulous records of his medications and symptoms. How you researched and arranged for the bathroom to be modified with safety features when Mom's arthritis made it hard for her to get in and out of the tub." He looked up at me. "She told me that when Dad had that bad episode last spring and wandered away from the house, you're the one who found him 3 blocks away at 2 in the morning. You're the one who held his hand in the emergency room while they evaluated him. You're the one who took 2 weeks of vacation time to stay with them afterward until you were sure it was safe to leave them alone again." I swallowed hard, uncomfortable with the recognition. "There are parents, Brian. That's what you do for family." "Is it?" he asked quietly. "Because I haven't been doing those things. I've been sending money occasionally and calling once a week. I convinced myself that was enough, that my contribution was equal to yours because I was busy building my career and family." The admission hung between us. "Mom also told me something else," he continued. "She told me that they offered to sell the house 2 years ago to move closer to me and Jennifer and the kids. That they were willing to leave the place they love to be more present in their grandchildren's lives. And I told them it wasn't necessary, that we were too busy to have them underfoot. That it would be disruptive to our routine." I remembered the devastation on Mom's face when she returned from that visit to New York. She had never shared these details with me. So when you suddenly became interested in selling the house at Christmas, I said, understanding dawning, they knew it wasn't about being closer to family. Brian nodded, shame evident in his expression. It was about solving my problems, not theirs. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of years of misunderstandings and different priorities between us. I still think they would receive better care in a facility, Brian said eventually. The house isn't ideally suited for their conditions. I know, I acknowledged. And if it comes to the point where they truly can't remain safely at home, I won't keep them there out of stubbornness. But that decision will be made based on their needs and wishes, not financial convenience. And the modifications you mentioned at Christmas? Are those actually happening? I nodded. The contractor starts next week on converting the downstairs study into a bedroom and bathroom for them. The insurance is covering part of it as medically necessary modifications. And I'm covering the rest. Brian looked surprised. That must be expensive. It is, I acknowledged. But unlike some people, I've been saving rather than speculating in high-risk investments. He winced at the barb, but didn't argue. What happens when the money runs out? Their care will only get more expensive. I've run the numbers, Brian. With their pensions, Social Security, Medicare, and the supplemental insurance I set up, we can manage their care needs for the foreseeable future. If things change dramatically, we'll reassess. But selling their home is the absolute last resort, not the first option. He seemed to be processing this information, perhaps realizing for the first time that I had been planning for our parents' future with as much diligence as he approached his investment portfolios. I made a mistake, Brian finally said. Several mistakes, actually. It was as close to an apology as I'd ever heard from him. I was so focused on finding a solution that looked good on paper that I missed what was important. Their happiness, their dignity, their wishes. He looked me in the eye. And I underestimated you, Amanda. I've been treating you like the little sister I left behind 15 years ago. Not like the capable adult you've become. The acknowledgement was unexpected and, I had to admit, gratifying. Where do we go from here? I asked. I withdraw the legal challenge, officially. You keep the house, as Mom and Dad intended. He hesitated. And maybe, if you're willing, we start rebuilding some trust. I'd like my children to know their grandparents better. And to know their aunt. It was a beginning, fragile but real. I think Mom and Dad would like that, I said. And so would I. As we prepared to leave the coffee shop, Brian asked one more question. Would you have really enforced the 24-hour eviction at Christmas? I smiled slightly. What do you think? He studied my face. I think you would have let us stay. But you needed to show me you were serious. Family is always welcome in that house, Brian. Always. But only if they respect what it means to Mom and Dad. And now, to me as well. He nodded, understanding the boundary that had been drawn. As we parted ways outside, the winter sun breaking through clouds, I felt a weight lifting. The house was secure. Our parents would remain in their home. And just maybe, our family had taken a small step toward healing. Spring arrived with a gentle persistence, much like the healing that had begun in our family. The renovations to create a first-floor bedroom and accessible bathroom for Mom and Dad were completed in February, making their daily lives significantly easier. The wheelchair ramp at the side entrance blended surprisingly well with the historic character of the house. A testament to the skilled contractor who understood that modifications could be both practical and aesthetic. Brian had been true to his word. The legal challenge was withdrawn, and more importantly, he had begun making regular video calls with our parents, often including Thomas and Elizabeth. The conversations were somewhat awkward at first, but grew more natural over time. Mom particularly cherished these digital connections with her grandchildren, saving artwork they mailed and displaying it proudly on the refrigerator. In April, Brian called me with an unexpected proposal. I've been thinking about the summer, he said. Jennifer and I both have some vacation time in July. We were wondering if we could bring the kids to stay at the house for a week. All of us together. The suggestion of a family gathering in the home that had nearly divided us seemed both ironic and hopeful. I think Mom and Dad would love that, I replied. Are you sure you want to spend a week in our outdated family home? There was a smile in his voice when he answered. I've been reconsidering my definition of outdated lately. Some things improve with age and memory, not just with modern upgrades. I couldn't help but tease him a little. Who are you, and what have you done with my brother? He laughed. Let's just say I've been doing some reflection on what really matters. When I shared the news with Mom and Dad, their joy was palpable. Mom immediately began planning menus and activities for the grandchildren. Dad, having more bad days than good now, still understood enough to smile at the prospect of a full house again. Family coming home, he said, patting my hand. That's as it should be. The preparations for the July visit became a project that gave Mom renewed purpose. We refreshed the guest rooms together, sorting through old toys and books that might interest Thomas and Elizabeth. I took a week of vacation to coincide with their visit, wanting to ensure everything went smoothly and to provide additional support for Mom and Dad. When Brian's family arrived, something remarkable happened. The tension that had defined our Christmas confrontation was replaced by a tentative but genuine warmth. Jennifer, whom I had always perceived as cold and status-conscious, revealed a softer side, particularly in her interactions with Dad. She sat patiently with him for hours, looking through photo albums and listening to his increasingly fragmented stories with respect and interest. The children, initially shy around their grandparents, quickly adapted to the rhythms of the old house. Elizabeth discovered the window seat in the upstairs hallway that had been my favorite reading spot as a child. Thomas became fascinated with Dad's collection of historical maps in the attic. They both enjoyed helping Mom in the garden, learning the names of flowers that had bloomed in that same soil for decades. Brian, perhaps most surprisingly of all, seemed to rediscover aspects of himself that had been buried beneath years of corporate ambition. One evening, I found him sitting on the porch swing with Dad, both of them silent but comfortable, watching the fireflies emerge at dusk. Another day, he spent hours fixing the loose boards on the old treehouse that had been his childhood project, so Thomas and Elizabeth could play there safely. On their last evening, after the children were in bed, the four adults sat in the living room sharing a bottle of wine. The conversation turned, inevitably, to the future. How are you managing with Dad's care? Brian asked me, his tone genuinely concerned rather than judgmental. Mom mentioned he had another episode last month. It's challenging, I admitted. The home health aide comes 5 days a week now, which helps tremendously. But there are still difficult moments. And you're able to balance it with your work? Jennifer asked. My firm has been incredibly supportive, I explained. They've allowed me to adjust my schedule and work remotely 2 days a week. It's not always easy, but we're managing. Brian exchanged a look with Jennifer before speaking again. We've been discussing something we'd like to propose. He took a breath. I've been offered a position that would allow me to work remotely most of the time. We're considering moving back to this area, at least for a few years. The suggestion caught me completely by surprise. You would leave New York? What about the children's schools? Your career trajectory? Some priorities have shifted, he said simply. The children could get an excellent education here. And as for my career, I'm learning there are different definitions of success. I looked at Jennifer, wondering if this was truly a joint decision or if Brian was pressuring her. It was actually my idea, she said, seeming to read my thoughts. Watching the children with their grandparents this week has been eye-opening. These are relationships worth nurturing while we still can. And frankly, the pace in New York was becoming unsustainable for our family. We wouldn't intrude on the care arrangements you've established, Brian added quickly. But we could be another layer of support. Weekend coverage, so you could have real time off. Emergency backup when needed. The offer was tempting, but I remained cautious. What about the house? I need to be sure this isn't another angle on taking control. Brian shook his head. The house is yours, legally and morally. You've earned that right. We'd find our own place nearby. Close enough to help, but not so close as to interfere. I studied my brother's face, looking for signs of the old agenda, the hidden calculations. Instead, I saw something I hadn't seen in many years. Sincerity. I think it could work, I said finally. But we'd need clear boundaries and open communication. Absolutely, Jennifer agreed. We've learned some hard lessons about assumptions and communication. As they prepared to leave the next morning, Mom pulled me aside while Brian was loading the car. This is what I always wanted, she said, tears in her eyes. Not just the house preserved, but the family. You've made that possible, Amanda. We all did, I corrected her. Including Brian, eventually. She smiled. People can surprise you if you give them the chance. Throughout the summer and fall, Brian and Jennifer moved forward with their relocation plans. They found a house just 15 minutes away. Close enough for regular involvement, but respecting the boundaries we had discussed. The children enrolled in the local schools for the January semester. As Christmas approached, we decided to host the holiday at the family home once again, a deliberate do-over of the previous year's disaster. This time, the preparations were collaborative rather than combative. Brian and his family arrived on December 23rd, bringing warmth and gifts rather than hidden agendas. On Christmas Eve, as we all gathered in the living room to decorate the tree, I found myself standing back, watching the scene with a full heart. Dad was having one of his increasingly rare good days, showing Thomas how to hang the antique ornaments that had been in the family for generations. Mom and Jennifer were arranging presents while Elizabeth carefully placed cookies and milk for Santa. Brian caught my eye from across the room and raised his glass in a silent toast. In that moment, I realized that what we had preserved was far more valuable than just a house. We had rescued the meaning of home, the essence of family, the power of belonging somewhere. The property deed in my name was important, but it was just paper. The true ownership was in the memories these walls contained, the traditions they sheltered, the love they witnessed. Family is complicated. Homes are complicated. The intersection of the two can be a battlefield or a sanctuary. In our case, it had been both. But standing there watching 3 generations gather under the glow of Christmas lights, I knew we had found our way to the sanctuary side of the equation. As we move forward, I don't know exactly what the future holds. Dad's condition will continue to progress. Mom's health will have its own challenges. The house itself will need ongoing care and updates. But I do know that decisions will be made with love and respect at their center, not convenience or financial gain. And I know that the burden of care and the joy of family will be more evenly shared. Last week, I received the Christmas card Brian and Jennifer sent to friends and family this year. The photo on the front showed all of us on the porch of the family home, 3 generations smiling in the autumn sunshine. On the back, Brian had written a personal note. Thank you for teaching me the difference between a house and a home. Some lessons come the hard way, but they're the ones that stick. Some people say you can never go home again. I think the truth is more nuanced. Home evolves. Families evolve. Sometimes the way forward requires a painful confrontation with the past. Sometimes healing comes only after the courage to draw a line in the sand. And sometimes, if you're lucky, what seems like an ending becomes a new beginning. So, if you're facing your own family property drama or feeling pressured to make decisions that don't align with your values, remember this. Stand your ground when it matters most. Speak your truth with both courage and compassion. The right people will eventually listen. Thank you for staying with me through this story. If you found it meaningful, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more stories of family challenges and triumphs. Have you ever had to stand up to family pressure over property or inheritance? Share your experience in the comments below. And remember, sometimes the most precious things we inherit aren't things at all, but the courage to protect what matters most. See you in the next video.